Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hi, Freya. You wanted to see me? Come on in.
Hello, Professor Dubois. About the presentation. I'm a bit stressed about which topic to choose. I want something engaging but also manageable.
What subjects or areas have you been considering?
Well, I'm interested in social media, but I'm not sure what angle to take. There's so much to talk about.
Social media is a big topic and in the news a lot at the moment. What specifically about social media interests you?
I'm interested in its impact on mental health, but I've also thought about discussing its role in business, or how it affects politics.
Okay, all excellent angles. Let's break them down a bit. What do you find interesting about social media's impact on mental health?
I've read a lot about how it can lead to anxiety and depression, especially among teenagers. I think it's a very important issue.
It certainly is. What about social media's role in business? Any specific aspect?
I find it fascinating how companies use social media for marketing and brand building. It can be really targeted. It doesn't reach everyone, of course, like older people. But I think it's amazing how a single post can go viral and change everything. I mean, like literally overnight. A product, something someone has posted about. And anyone can do it. It can just sell out or bomb. Nobody will touch it. It's crazy.
True. And what about politics?
The way social media influences elections and public opinion is extraordinary. There's a lot to explore about fake news and misinformation, too.
All those topics have a lot of potential. Which one do you feel you have the most background knowledge in?
Probably the impact on mental health. We had a series of talks from the student counselor about social media and staying safe, mentally, when you're engaging with sites like TikTok or Facebook.
That's a big plus. Having a good foundation will make your research process smoother, but which topic do you think your audience would find most interesting? For me, that's key. Remember, some of your marks will be based on feedback from your audience.
That's the thing. I think people would be interested in all of them.
Okay, well, what about the scope of each topic? Which do you feel you can cover comprehensively within the time limit? Not just the time for the presentation itself, but the prep time. You have a lot of assignments.
Don't I know it? I kind of think the mental health aspect might be the easiest. I think the political angle is so vast, and it's complicated. I think I'd get swamped trying to cover it all, especially since it's constantly changing.
Well, it sounds like you've made your choice.
Wow, I do. Thanks for that, Professor Dubois.
Not at all. Don't forget drafts are due on the 14th.
Sure, I'll be on time. Thanks, Professor.
Listen to part of a lecture in a class on brand image. The professor is discussing the role and importance of brand image.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're delving into the captivating world of brand image. Imagine a brand as a person. Just like individuals, brands have personalities, values, and reputations. Brand image is the sum of all impressions, associations, and experiences consumers have with that brand. Why does it matter? It's everything. A strong brand image can differentiate a product in a crowded market, build consumer trust and loyalty, and even command higher prices. Think about Apple. What comes to mind? Sleek design and innovation, right? That's their meticulously crafted brand image. And that isn't just about logos and advertisements. It's about every touchpoint consumers have with the brand. Website design, packaging, customer service, social media posts, even what friends say about it. That means that to maintain a positive brand image, companies must really get to grips with their audience. Since brand image is shaped by everything customers think and experience, it's not something the company can fully control. And that's why they really have to work at it, staying in touch with what customers think and feel, knowing exactly who their customers are. Nike's marketing campaigns, for example, resonate with their target demographic of athletes and fitness enthusiasts. Any deviation from these values risks alienating consumers. We can see that with Pepsi's controversial ad featuring Kendall Jenner. Do you remember that one? A reality TV star taking part in a protest offering a can of Pepsi to a police officer at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was astonishingly inept, and the ad got pulled after people complained it trivialized the issue. It had nothing to do with the quality of the product or the cost of the campaign. You can bet Pepsi's profits took a hit with that one. That illustrates how companies have to adapt. That brand image evolves over time with changing consumer trends or preferences. Patagonia, a brand known for its commitment to sustainability, reflects a shift towards ethical consumption, earning praise from environmentally conscious consumers. They chose to adapt to new social trends and concerns, building their image around that concept. And it was a success. That said, consistency is also a key aspect. So brand image is a balancing act between consistency and change. Think about Coca-Cola's iconic red logo. It is instantly recognizable worldwide, isn't it? Would you change that? I don't think so. Of course, it is possible to completely rebrand a product, but it carries risks. Companies that want to appeal to new segments of the audience may sometimes make small tweaks, but rarely change their core identity. Take Old Spice. It used to be a brand of aftershave for older men, but then it shifted its focus to attract a younger audience without abandoning its older customers. When I was at Ogilvy, I saw just how pivotal brand image is to success, and that's with brands ranging from tech startups to established retail giants. We dealt with all kinds. To be successful, you need effective strategic branding, but you also have to be willing to adapt to avoid critical missteps. And that all comes back to understanding your consumers.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a university housing officer.
Hi, sorry to bother you, but I wanted to talk about my housing situation. I've been thinking about moving out of campus housing.
Okay. What's prompting this decision?
Well, I'm finding living on campus hard. A lot of the girls in my dorm are into partying. There's a lot of coming and going with the guys on the ground floor, sports majors. And I'm not into that. I travelled a long way and left my family behind to study here. And it's so noisy and busy in the dorm that I can't work there. I work late in the library, but I hate having to cross campus at night. It doesn't feel safe.
I understand. It sounds like you're dealing with some challenging conditions.
Exactly. I thought living on campus would be best for my studies, but it's turning out to be the opposite.
That's not good. Have you considered reaching out to your resident advisor or campus security to address your concerns about safety?
Yes, it was my RA who suggested I talk to you. Security says it's fine and the campus is safe, but I just don't feel that way. I just feel like I need a quieter, more peaceful environment where I can concentrate without distractions.
Have you explored any options within the residential housing, like requesting a dorm change or discussing a complaint?
I think it's just the way dorms are. I think it's harder for me too because I'm a more mature student. Most of the people there are still teenagers. I'm 26, and I don't want to make an official complaint. I just want to quietly move on. I've been exploring some off-campus options like renting an apartment or sharing a house with friends.
Got it. You know what's right for you. Just make sure you consider factors like safety, transportation, and budgeting.
I can afford to move out. And actually, I have a friend studying at MIT just across the river, and there's an apartment in her building that's up for rent.
It looks like you've done your homework.
Yeah, but I'm not sure about the process for terminating my housing contract.
If you're looking to terminate mid-semester, there may be some financial implications.
I've paid for the whole semester, so I'll stay until the end. It'll give me time to arrange a move.
Right. Then, in that case, you just need to make a formal request, but put it in writing. Just say what you've told me. I'll bring it up at the next housing meeting, which is, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you get it done by then?
Yes, I can do it this afternoon.
Alrighty. I can let you know what they say by the end of the day tomorrow. I can't see that there could be any objections to your moving out, but you do have to register with Allison Rodriguez, the welfare officer. She'll want to keep tabs on you for the first few weeks. How does that sound?
It sounds great. Wow, that's a weight off my mind. I'll go and do that letter now. Thanks for your help.
You're welcome, and happy house hunting.
Listen to part of a lecture in a history of the English language class.
Okay, so English is often called a mongrel language, but it is more than just a pidgin or a creole. A pidgin is a simplified form of language that develops as a way for speakers of different native languages to communicate. Pidgins typically have limited vocabulary and simplified grammar, and they aren't native languages for any group of speakers. They are usually created for practical purposes like trade. A creole, on the other hand, is a fully developed language that evolves from a pidgin when it becomes the native language of a community. Creoles develop more complex grammar and vocabulary over time. English, however, goes beyond that. While many languages borrow words from other cultures, English has been doing this on a vast scale for a very long time. Does the year 1066 ring a bell? That's when William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, defeated King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings and became King of England. Overnight, practically, Old English, which was the Germanic language of the Anglo-Saxons, was replaced, mainly among the ruling classes, with Norman French. Norman French then dominated the English court, government, and aristocracy for over 300 years. How do we know that? Primarily through lexical borrowing, or words that English stole from French. Approximately 30% of English words have a French origin, and many of these words form the core vocabulary of various fields, from law and government to art and cuisine. Words like court, judge, jury, parliament, and government entered English through Norman French, reflecting the administrative and legal dominance of the Normans. Terms such as duke, countess, baron, and peasant highlight the hierarchical structure imposed by the Normans, but the influence went further than that. When we think about what the nobility and aspirants to Norman French culture wore and how they spent their time, when they weren't subduing native Britons, that is, words like garment, jewel, and luxury, poetry, romance, and author, all came into English from the French of the ruling class. Yet English is a bit of a glutton. It didn't replace old words with Norman French new ones. It kept both. And nowhere is this more evident than in terms of food. Beef, mutton, pork, and veal are from French. The Old English words were the same as for the animals themselves: cow, sheep, pig, and calf. This distinction often reflects the division between the Norman aristocrats who consumed the meat and the English peasants who tended the animals and prepared the food. The Norman conquest created a sociolinguistic divide. While the upper classes spoke Norman French, the lower classes continued to speak Old English. Over time, these two languages began to merge, especially as the Normans became more integrated into English society. By the end of the 14th century, English had re-emerged as the dominant language, but it had been significantly altered. This new form is known as Middle English, the language of Chaucer, often regarded as the father of English literature. While English retained its Germanic roots, the structure of the language changed between the Norman conquest and the emergence of Middle English. It developed a more rigid word order and adopted many French prefixes and suffixes, which expanded its capacity for nuanced expression. The phonology, or sound system, was also affected. The Normans introduced new sounds and stress patterns. And while we struggle with reading Chaucer today, you know what I'm talking about, right? It is recognizably English. There are several reasons why French began to lessen its influence on English. The prolonged conflict between England and France during the 100 Years' War, actually from 1337 to 1453, fostered a sense of English national identity and reduced the prestige of the French language. The Black Death, from 1347 to 1351, drastically reduced the population, creating a shortage of skilled workers. Since these workers primarily spoke English, their increased social mobility helped English reassert itself. In 1362, the Statute of Pleading was enacted, mandating that English rather than French be used in the courts. However, that didn't stop English from borrowing from other languages. With the expansion of trade in the 15th and 16th centuries and Britain's global colonial expansion in the 17th and 18th centuries, the borrowing process only accelerated, and it hasn't and won't stop. We only have to look at neologisms to see that, but we'll move on to that another time.
Listen to part of a lecture in an environmental science class.
Desertification is the process by which fertile land becomes increasingly arid, eventually transforming into desert-like conditions. Several factors contribute to desertification, and the one that immediately springs to mind is climate change. Changes in temperature and rainfall patterns usually exacerbated by human activities, can lead to decreased soil moisture and increased evaporation rates, accelerating the process by which once fertile land turns into a barren desert. I say they are usually exacerbated by human activity, because nature can look after itself if it weren't compromised by what we do. For example, intensive grazing leads to erosion because goats or cattle eat all the vegetation, and the roots are uprooted. Without greenery, moisture evaporates, and the soil disappears over time. Clearing trees or deforestation, whether to build homes, create fields, or even just collect firewood, is another issue. Removing trees exposes the topsoil to the elements, causing degradation and ultimately leading to desertification. And even where the situation isn't too bad, unsustainable agricultural practices, such as monoculture farming, poor irrigation and lack of mulching, can reduce the capacity for water replenishment, making conditions increasingly arid as less and less water becomes available. So, what happens when desertification affects an area? One major consequence is habitat loss or fragmentation. When an area turns to desert, it affects migratory animals on their routes to traditional feeding or breeding grounds. They have to pass through arid regions with little or no food, and some don't make it. Most vulnerable are plant and animal species adapted to specific ecological niches, but any loss of biodiversity reduces the resilience of ecosystems. Of course, degraded soils are less fertile and therefore less productive too. And when crop yields fall, we get food insecurity. In countries like the US, that's not usually a matter of life and death. But in regions where communities rely on subsistence agriculture, any decline in yield poses a serious threat to life. Competition over dwindling resources, including land, water, and grazing areas, can also exacerbate social tensions and conflicts among communities, which can destabilize entire regions. Look what happened in Darfur, in the Sudan. Hundreds of thousands dead and millions displaced. So what can we do about it? Well, desertification is a complex problem, and addressing it requires comprehensive strategies, and that means it isn't all about individual farmers or families. It requires whole community engagement and, more importantly, support from government and the wider international community. We believe we're safe. We can point to places like the Sudan and say smugly, that couldn't happen here. But I guess the people of Darfur thought the same. According to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD, desertification already affects over 3.6 billion people globally and threatens the livelihoods of millions more. These impacts are the result of centuries of environmental damage, and we must find ways to address the increasing environmental challenges ahead. Okay, so before we all get too depressed, let's look at some success stories.